Elephants do not just remember paths and waterholes. They can remember the humans who once meant safety, relief, or survival, and some of that memory appears to last for years. That sounds like folklore until you look at Germany, where two African savanna elephants named Bibi and Panya reacted most strongly to the scent of former keepers after more than 13 years apart. It gets even stranger in Kenya, where elephants did not merely react to human voices in general. They distinguished Maasai adult men from Kamba men, from Maasai women, and Maasai boys. So this story is not about a cute myth that elephants are sentimental. It is about a long-lived social species using memory in ways that are deeply practical and sometimes deeply emotional. By the end, we are going to look at the brain, the scent studies, the voice studies, the sanctuary reunions, and the bigger reason humans keep underestimating what elephant minds are storing. Start with the basic ecological reality. An elephant that forgets too much does not just become less impressive, it becomes less likely to survive. Drought, migration, conflict, and social disruption. Elephants live for decades, move across large landscapes, and rely on memory for seasonal water sources, migration routes, safe corridors, kinship ties, and the difference between danger and ordinary noise. That means memory in elephants is not an optional extra like a party trick. It is part of the operating system that lets a family group function across time and changing conditions. In elephant societies, one individual does not carry all the knowledge. Equally, matriarchs are often described as living archives because their experience can guide an entire group through hard years. When researchers and field observers talk about elephant memory, they are usually talking about a package, not one isolated skill. Spatial knowledge, social recognition, danger assessment, and emotional learning working together. That package matters because remembering a helpful human is not separate from remembering a safe water route or a threatening voice. It comes from the same broader ability to track meaningful relationships. A human who bottle-fed a calf, treated an injury, or handled an elephant gently over months becomes part of the elephant's map of who matters, just like a route or a rival herd. The reason this sounds extraordinary to us is that humans often rank intelligence by language-like behavior, while elephants evolved to solve a different set of problems over much longer timescales. An elephant family has to keep track of other elephants across fission-fusion social lives, where groups split and rejoin, relationships shift, and social memory has to remain useful over time. That is already complicated before you add people, roads, fences, farms, sanctuaries, poaching pressure, and the fact that some humans bring danger while others bring rescue or care. So the question is not whether elephants notice individual humans. The better question is how much detail they store, how long they keep it, and which senses carry that memory best. The answer begins with the brain, but we need to be careful because internet retellings flatten real anatomy into one lazy line about elephants having a giant memory center. The solid point is that elephants have the largest brains of any land mammal, and their temporal lobe is disproportionately large, which matters because long-term memory and social processing live there. The popular claim usually jumps straight to the hippocampus, since the hippocampus is central for memory and spatial mapping in many mammals, including humans, but that part needs nuance. Some comparative studies suggest the elephant hippocampus may be proportionally smaller than people expect relative to overall brain size, even while being large in absolute terms and fully functional for complex memory. So the safest scientific wording is not that elephants have a magically oversized hippocampus that explains everything. It is that they combine memory circuitry, huge temporal lobes, social complexity, and exceptional scent processing. That last part matters more than many people realize because elephants do not experience the world the way humans do, with vision automatically taking center stage in every social moment. Elephants live in a scent-rich world, and smell carries identity. Reproductive information, group membership, environmental cues, and probably a large amount of social information humans barely notice. If a former keeper handled an elephant daily, fed it, soothed it, cleaned it, or treated injuries, that person's scent may become more biologically meaningful than a face glimpse from a distance. That is exactly why the best documented scientific case is so important, because it tested familiar versus unfamiliar cues across multiple senses instead of assuming human-style face recognition was the whole story. The elephants were Bibi and Panya, two African savanna elephants tested at Serengeti Park Hodenhagen in Germany after separation from former keepers connected to Tierpark Berlin. The remarkable part was not a vague reunion claim on social media. The remarkable part was the length of separation, which was more than 13 years before the familiar cues were presented. Researchers used auditory, visual, and olfactory cues, then measured interest through behaviors such as trunk reach duration and related responses, rather than simply declaring that the elephants looked emotional. The strongest statistically significant recognition signal came from scent, with the elephants showing greater interest in the odor of familiar former keepers than in unfamiliar humans. That matters for two reasons at once. First, it shows long-term interspecific social memory, meaning memory of specific humans rather than only other elephants. Second, it shows that smell may be the key channel. Bibi and Panya were not reacting to humanness in the abstract. They were reacting differently to known people from their own earlier life, and after more than a decade, that is hard to dismiss. It also gives us a practical warning about how we frame intelligence, because humans often say animals recognize someone only when the cue looked dramatic to human eyes, like a visible approach or embrace. But an elephant may be showing the deepest recognition long before that. Through trunk extension, scent sampling, pause patterns, body orientation, or heightened attention that does not read as cinematic to us. In other words, the most powerful moment in elephant memory research may not be the one that makes the best viral clip. It may be the one that looks like careful sniffing. Now move from sanctuaries and former keepers to the wild, because if elephants can sort helpful humans from strangers, the darker side is whether they can sort dangerous humans from less dangerous ones. The Kenyan voice studies are crucial here because they show elephants reacting not only to a species category called human, but to finer distinctions inside that category based on experience. Researchers played recordings from different human groups, and elephants responded more defensively to the voices of Maasai adult men than to Kamba men, Maasai women, or Maasai boys. That pattern was not random, and the response was not subtle in the wrong context. Behaviors included bunching together and showing heightened alertness, which are protective social reactions. The important point is that the elephants were using learned information about which kinds of humans historically posed greater threat than retrieving that information when hearing voices alone. They were not reading clothing, posture, or weapons in that moment. They were hearing a voice and connecting it to stored categories of risk. That means elephants can encode ethnicity-linked, sex-linked, and age-linked patterns in human behavior strongly enough for those distinctions to influence immediate defensive action later on. This case is not about helpers, but it proves something essential for the helper question. Elephant memory of humans is detailed, adaptive, and tied to real consequences. A species that can remember which human voices are likely to signal danger can also remember which human cues were linked to calm handling, feeding, rescue, or relief from pain. That brings us to observational cases, where the data are less controlled than a formal experiment, but still worth looking at when the prior relationship is documented and the behavior is specific. One of the most discussed examples is Moyo in Zimbabwe, a rescued elephant whose reunion with a longtime caretaker was described by conservation accounts after an 18-month rupture in close contact. During that reunion, Moyo reportedly took the caretaker's hand, drew it toward her mouth as she had when younger, rumbled, relaxed, and showed temporal glands streaming associated with arousal or excitement. Why does that detail matter so much? Because it suggests not just recognition of an individual, but recognition of a relationship pattern that had existed earlier in life. Drawing a hand toward the mouth, the way she had done before, reads like memory with continuity, as if the old interaction script was still available and still meaningful. We still need caution here because one reunion scene is not a controlled trial and cannot prove every claim people like to project onto elephants. But when an observational case lines up with experimental evidence about scent recognition, long-term memory, and differentiated responses to specific humans, it becomes more than a sentimental anecdote. Another widely known case involves Shirley, an Asian elephant linked to caretaker Solomon James, and later moved into sanctuary care after years as the sole elephant resident at a Louisiana zoo. Sanctuary records documented Solomon's return visit on Shirley's 70th birthday, and the footage circulated widely among elephant care communities because the interaction felt unmistakably personal to viewers. Again, the scientific standard matters. Shirley and Solomon provide supportive observational evidence, not laboratory-style proof, so this case should be framed carefully rather than used as standalone certainty. Still, repeated patterns matter, and a documented prior relationship, plus known separation, plus recognizable reunion behavior make these cases harder to dismiss than random internet clips with no context. That context standard is important because not every video labeled "Elephant remembers human" is reliable evidence of deep social memory. The strongest cases share 4 features: named animals, a documented earlier relationship, a known period of time apart, and detailed behavioral description, ideally paired with formal testing. Once you use that filter, the picture becomes clearer and more serious. Elephants really do seem capable of retaining specific, meaningful information about particular humans over long periods. To understand what exactly they may be remembering, it helps to break memory into layers instead of treating it like one giant emotional blob. One layer is sensory identity, the smell, voice, and perhaps visible movement patterns that let an elephant distinguish one human from another. Another layer is practical association. This person brings food. This person causes fear. This person helps after injury. This person separates me. This person is safe around calves. A third layer is emotional valence, meaning the memory is not neutral data stored in a drawer. It is marked by comfort, stress, grief, or relief. That emotional marking matters because memories tied to survival and care tend to remain behaviorally important longer than trivial encounters. A fourth layer may be relational patterning, where the elephant remembers not only the individual but the kind of interaction usually shared with that person. This is why a reunion can sometimes look oddly specific rather than generally excited, with an elephant repeating a gesture or body routine that belonged to that earlier bond. Human observers are often startled by that, because it resembles the way people return to old habits with old friends, but caution is still needed before claiming identical inner experience. The safest language is not that elephants feel exactly like humans. It is that they show durable social bonds, differentiated responses to individuals, and memory shaped by experience and emotional significance. That alone is already extraordinary because plenty of animals recognize familiar people in the short term, yet far fewer have the lifespan and social architecture to make decades-long relationship memory so useful. Long lifespan changes everything here, because an elephant is not living through a quick cycle where forgetting old individuals carries little cost. A matriarch may survive multiple droughts, shifting alliances, habitat changes, and encounters with both dangerous and helpful humans, making memory a survival investment rather than a sentimental leftover. That is why spatial memory and social memory should not be separated too sharply in elephants. Both are about keeping track of what mattered when conditions were hard. Remembering a distant water source after a bad, dry year, and remembering a human who once provided treatment both fit the same broader logic of meaningful retention. Even the danger assessment findings from Kenya reinforce this picture, because bunching behavior and alertness show that stored human information can directly shape group-level defensive decisions. In a species where calves, mothers, aunts, sisters, and elders coordinate closely, one individual's memory can quickly become protection for many others. That opens another reason humans misread elephants. We often imagine memory as private, but in social species memory can become distributed through group behavior. An experienced matriarch that avoids one route, reacts strongly to one category of voice, or relaxes around one known caretaker is not just remembering for herself. She is acting as part of a family archive, and the rest of the group may benefit from knowledge they never had to learn the hard way. This idea of elephants as living archives is one reason their behavior around death, reunion, and separation has fascinated observers for so long. People are struck by scenes that appear emotionally structured rather than purely reflexive, especially when elephants pause, vocalize, or alter behavior around bodies, absences, or returns. Science cannot simply translate those moments into human words, but it can say that elephants track individuals in ways that are socially rich and behaviorally durable. That conclusion becomes even stronger when you compare elephants to other intelligent animals without pretending every species is doing exactly the same thing. Dolphins are known for long memory of signature whistles, effectively, remembering identity-linked calls over years, and perhaps decades, which shows how enduring social memory can evolve in another large-brained species. Corvids, such as crows, can remember human faces and even spread information socially about which people are dangerous, proving that cross-species recognition is not limited to mammals. Great apes show strong social memory and flexible relationship tracking, while dogs excel at odor-based recognition and emotional reading of human behavior. What sets elephants apart is the combination: huge home ranges, long life, grief-linked social attention, multisensory memory, and an ecological need to remember relationships over very long spans. So when a rescued elephant seems to recognize a former keeper after years, that is not a supernatural exception breaking the laws of nature. It is exactly the sort of outcome you would expect from an animal built to remember who mattered, where safety once came from, and which signals belong to danger. This also changes how we should think about elephant care, sanctuary management, and field interactions with wild populations. If scent carries so much weight, then moving elephants, changing handlers, or reintroducing former keepers may have effects that are stronger than simple human intuition would predict. If voice categories matter in the wild, then human communities around. Elephants are not just background noise, they become part of the elephant's learned social landscape. If emotional valence shapes memory retention, then rough handling, repeated stress, or calm rescue may leave traces that persist well beyond the immediate event. That raises an ethical point without needing any exaggeration. The human behavior and elephant experiences may become part of its world for a very long time. A short moment for us can become a durable reference point for them, especially if it involved fear, pain, soothing, or survival. This is one reason the viral language habit of saying elephants never forget needs both defense and restraint. It deserves defense because the phrase captures a genuine pattern of exceptional long-term memory, including memory for specific humans under the right conditions. It also needs restraint because never suggests a magical perfection that science does not claim, and because each case depends on context, cue type, relevance, and prior experience. The stronger scientific statement is more interesting anyway. Elephants appear capable of storing and retrieving highly specific information about humans over long periods, especially when those humans were emotionally or practically important. That is not a fairy tale version of animal intelligence. It is an evidence-based picture built from cognition, social ecology, and documented observation. The Bibi and Panya case anchors the story with a formal result, because the separation exceeded 13 years and the familiar scent response was statistically significant. The Kenyan voice studies anchor another side of the story because they show elephants sorting human risk categories with enough precision to change defensive behavior. Moyo in Zimbabwe and Shirley with Solomon James ad-lib texture, provided we treat them correctly as observational support and not as lab-grade proof by themselves. Together, those cases show a mind that is noticing much more than most humans imagine, and storing it in ways that remain useful long after the first encounter has passed. That usefulness is the key idea, because memory in elephants is not a museum, it is an active survival tool. Migration routes matter because missing a water source can kill. Kinship matters because alliances affect protection. Danger assessment matters because one wrong red can cost a calf or a whole group. In that wider system, a helpful human is not just a nice memory. That human may become classified alongside other high-value information about safety and relief. That is why rescue stories hit people so hard. They make visible what research already suggests. Elephants are not merely reacting in the moment. They are carrying biographies. And a biography is exactly what long-lived social animals need, because their world is built from histories, not just from immediate stimuli. If you want the cleanest one-sentence answer to the title, it is this. Elephants remember humans who helped them, because elephant survival already depends on remembering who and what mattered. Their large brains, powerful temporal lobes, scent-heavy perception, social complexity, and long lifespan all push in the same direction. The science does not require us to romanticize elephants into furry philosophers, and it does not permit us to downgrade them into instinct machines either. What it asks is something harder and more honest: to accept that another species can keep detailed records of us without using words, and sometimes keep them longer than we expect. Humans often assume that if another mind is quiet, it is empty. Elephant research keeps delivering the opposite lesson. Quiet minds can be crowded with routes, losses, dangers, allies, and the smell of a person who once meant safety after pain. So the next time you see an elephant pause, reach out with the trunk, bunch around a threatening voice, or soften around a known caretaker, remember that none of that begins in that instant. It begins years earlier, in stored experience, in social learning, and in a brain shaped for remembering what survival once looked like. If Bibi, Panya, Moyo, Shirley, and the Kenyan voice studies changed how you see elephant minds, watch the next animal science video on this channel for another evidence-based story about memory and behavior.